Okay, so today's masterclass is all to do with the planet Uranus moving into Gemini. So Uranus is one of the slower moving planets in the cosmos. It takes him 7 years to move through a sign of the zodiac. So he's just come out of spending 7 years in Taurus, and he's now going to spend 7 years in Gemini. So that's from the 5th of July 2025 until the 22nd of May 2033. So it's a long 7 year transit where he'll go, in and out of retrograde, but he's going to have a massive influence on us. So Uranus is the planet of change and independence. So the one thing with Uranus is I always call him the 7 year itch planet because he takes 7 years to move through his sign of the zodiac. And so it really shows us over a 7 year period, there'll be a lot of change in a certain area of your life. And of course, there'll be changes globally and collectively as well. But there'll be a lot of change going on. And the thing with Uranus is that he's also, the other name I call him is Mr. Curveball, because the changes he brings are more often than not the changes that you think you want or need. They're curveballs. They come from out of nowhere and they trigger a part of your life. And usually, when Uranus first does that to you, your first reaction is this: what's going on? This isn't what I wanted. This isn't what part of my plan. This isn't the idea or the concept that I had that I wanted to move forward with. This is completely different. But what happens is within a couple of weeks of the change that being presented to you, you become very aware that this was the perfect change that you needed. This was the one thing you needed to push you over the line, past the stop go sign, whatever it might be. Because this is what we need with change, is that change pushes us out of our comfort zone. And we get very comfortable in life. We like things to be the way it's always been. Don't like things to change, especially if it's comfortable for us. But the more comfortable we become, the more uncomfortable we often become as well, because the comfort zone becomes uncomfortable. But because it's so secure and it's something we're so familiar with, we don't want to change it. So we often find ourselves staying in situations, relationships, jobs, places, whatever it might be, way past their use by date because we don't want to initiate that change ourselves. So along comes Saturn and he initiates the change for you. So, like I said, often you'll be, just going through life thinking everything's fine. You might be wondering why things have stayed the same so long or why you're still in the same job or whatever. And then suddenly Uranus will throw this curveball at you, which initiates the change that is needed for you to go to the next level. Because the thing with Uranus is one of the planets of higher awareness. So the higher awareness planets are Neptune and Uranus. So Neptune gives us that higher spiritual awareness, whereas the higher awareness of Uranus is more about being unique, being innovative, thinking outside the box. How can we find new solutions to old problems? Uranus rules Aquarius, or Aquarius rules Uranus, however you want to look at it. And so, and Aquarius is all about change too. So, when we go through these massive shifts, particularly of a planet like Uranus that's about change, we've got to be prepared to embrace change. And so a lot of people don't like change. They'll run a mile from it. They like things to stay exactly the same. And that's because at the end of the day, we like security. We like to know that when we wake up tomorrow, this is going to happen or that's going to happen and it's all going to stay the same. We don't like to feel uncomfortable. And we certainly don't like to feel outside of our comfort zone. But it's outside the comfort zone where you actually grow. You can't grow while you stay the same because it's almost like we go through a stage of growth, then we plateau, then we go through another stage of growth, and then we plateau again. So, Uranus is about making you take that jump or take that step into more change so that you can keep growing and evolving as a soul on a journey. And like I said, the changes he brings are so often what we don't think we want or need, but always turn out to be exactly what we need at this time. So this is why, when it comes to change in our lives, it's always good to go with change. You take a step back and watch it and observe it and see where it's going to take you. But usually, if change is presented to you, especially when it comes from out of nowhere, it's usually the universe's way of saying it's time for change. You need to get out of what you're doing or get out of your comfort zone and start being something else or doing something else with your life. So, Uranus being that planet of change, he brings a lot of disruption in our lives as well. But he also brings us a lot of higher awareness where we get to, what he's really encouraging us all to do is to find new solutions to old problems, to find new ways to solve our own personal problems, but the problems of the universe or the planet, sorry, and especially. So, So, he really kind of rules your mind and what you might be capable of. So he pushes you outside the comfort zone, outside the box to do things differently. So, we all have all of us here have got jobs or not, but we all, whether you're working on in a job or not, you still have something that you do fairly habitually every day or that is a normal part of your life. And what you might find is those might be the things that are up for change. If you're comfortable, if your job's just changed already, or your relationships changed, or you've changed where you live or whatever recently, then that may be up for change again. But more often it's just about, okay, here's the change for you. Now settle into it and see how it feels, and see how you can grow and what you can evolve into and what you can create through embracing this type of change, whatever it might be. So it's also Uranus is that rules Aquarius, and so he rules our ability to see things from a higher perspective. So that intelligence that allows us to be innovative and creative and to do things differently. So that's what he's really activating within us. So what you might find, or what we can find as a collective or in general with the planet, the ways that we've planetarily always done something are going to change. Everything's up for change because we've also got, Saturn and Neptune and Aries, which are bringing all the revelations. And so as things are revealed, things change, and then something else is revealed, and then something changes. And so it is going to keep moving and changing in that way. But things, as we know, are becoming more and more exposed every day. And with the energy of Uranus, it's like things are being exposed so that they can be taken to the next level. Exposing some type of abuse, for instance, so that not so that well, so that something can be done about that, but so that it can also be handled differently. So if we look at, for instance, the terrible things in the world happening with child slavery and child trafficking and all that sort of thing, and it's become a very in some circles a very normal thing. It's certainly not anything any of us listening to this agree with or would be a part of, but it's something that needs to change. And so, the old ways of finding missing children or whatever might be, through the police or the FBI or whoever looks for missing children or whatever it might be. And, we can see that that's not working. Children are still going missing, they're not being found. So those old ways aren't working. So we need to find a new way. How else can we find these children and get them found? And I don't know what the solution is, but what I know is that every time you see something differently and see a different way of achieving a goal or getting from A to B, then that's very much the universe saying, embrace this. Try a new way of doing this, because only through doing things differently can we accept and embrace change. If we keep doing things the same old way, we don't change, nothing changes, and we actually start to rot and stagnate in our comfort zones because they become places of no movement, no growth. And we have to keep growing. That's part of our purpose on the earth plane, is to keep growing as individuals. So Uranus really keeps us on our toes. He keeps us very aware of what needs to change in our lives and what doesn't. And if we don't want to change, he'll just bring that change in for us anyway. Um, so so often what we find also with Uranus, as things start to work out in a new direction, it brings more change your way. So it's almost like you suddenly see a new direction or a new way of doing things, and it opens you up to all the other different ways you could also be using this energy or doing things differently in some way. So, Uranus is, like I say, 7 years to move through a sign of the zodiac. So he moves at the same speed as Chiron does. And so the next slowest moving planet after that would be Saturn, which is 3 years. So there's quite a big gap between a 7 year planet and a 3 year planet. It's quite significant what Uranus can do and change in our lives over a very short time. So Uranus also encourages independence. He encourages us to think for ourselves. And that's something that over the last quite a few years, we haven't been programmed out of in many ways, where we're not encouraged to think for ourselves anymore. We've been encouraged to hand our power over or to allow other people to make decisions for us and to know what's best for us. And so this is all up for change as well, because what we've all found that by relying on these outside forces to do things for us, we've lost our own ability to make decisions and to guide our own lives in the way that we feel is the best. So this is another thing that Uranus is really waking us up to, is the power of your own critical thinking. And it's something that a lot of us has dulled down over the years, or it's been dulled down in people in general. When we look at the education system, and it's just getting worse as the years go on, where it's kind of like a parroting system where you're told what to learn. You're not encouraged to think for yourself or to come up with a new idea for this or a new way of doing things. And this is what Uranus is going to really bring in, that change, and really force us, or encourage us, but force us to think for ourselves all over again, and realize that when you think for yourself and you come up with your own solutions, they work for you because you've thought of them for yourself. They're aligned with who you are. They use the gifts and the talents that you naturally have, and they come to you in a way that makes sense to you. So why would you not go with something like that? Why would you choose not choose that over something that doesn't make sense to you? But we've kind of got into this pattern of accepting things and going with changes and things that are going on in the world around us that don't feel right to us, but we still go along with it because that's what we've been told to do. So this is, really what's happening on the planet at the moment with all of the planets moving signs, is that we're all getting this huge wake-up call to start thinking for ourselves once again and realizing the power of that. And also, Aquarian energy, we're now in the age of Aquarius, and Uranus rules Aquarius. And Aquarian energy is all about, dancing to your own drumbeat. But it's interesting, Aquarian energy is all about being different. But one of its greatest needs or drives is community. It loves people to come together, to create something together. But it celebrates the fact that we can all come together as completely different people and create something that we are all aligned with. Because that's what it takes, really. It takes lots of different ways to solve a problem, or to create anything, different ideas, different ways of looking at it, different concepts. So when we all come together and we're allowed to think outside the box, and we're allowed to sort of share our own ideas and thoughts, we can find all sorts of similarities with other people. Or we can find that, you've got the idea, I know how to put it into practice, and you know how to market it. We can come together in this way. And that's what the Aquarian energy and Uranus energy is really supporting, is to celebrate that we're different, not to divide one another as we've been divided over the last many years, but to be divided because we have different talents and gifts that can be all used together. But you can stand alone in that as well, knowing this is what I'm good at, this is what I bring to the table. And so instead of all feeling like we've all got to do it this way, or we're all got to do it that way, we're really going to start being encouraged to do it differently. So that, that's what Uranus is bringing to the table with all of this. And then, of course, he's stepped into Gemini. So Gemini it's interesting. Uranus is the planet of change, and Gemini is probably the busiest sign of the zodiac. Gemini people, if anywhere Gemini people, they're always on the go. There's always something going on, something they're exploring, something they're investigating in some way. So when we've got the planet of change involved for the next 7 years in such a busy sign of the zodiac, it's going to be pretty chaotic out there. The world is going to start changing faster and faster and faster. And my belief is the real reason for this is so that we're going to be forced to think for ourselves. Because what we're finding is there's so much information out there now, and there's so much access to all of that information and misinformation, that we're sort of under this deluge of information, that so much stuff is coming at us from every angle. And so the only thing you can do when you're being under siege like that, because that's what it kind of feels like at time, is to go back to yourself and what feels right for you, what makes sense to you, what you can rely on within yourself, that if I take a step in this direction, I know within myself this feels right, so it's going to work out for me. It's going to be the right thing for me to do. Because, when we're surrounded by chaos, that's what we tend to do. We retreat, and we retreat into ourselves, but we're not meant to be retreating into ourselves to hide from what's going on, or to wait for someone else to decide for us. We're retreating into ourselves to find our own answers to what's going on. And I really believe that, we're all evolving at different rates in different ways, and because we're all on different frequencies. But your soul group and the people who your tribe, those people that you resonate with and spend a lot of time with, they're the ones that you're going to be able to come together with and hatch an idea, or hatch a new way of doing things, or just come together and decide there's a new way to do things. So Tina, with you, where you live on the farm and everything, have you noticed already that there's any new ideas within the community or on the farm of how to do things with what's going on externally?
Only probably a lot of the negative stuff coming up. I suppose there's a lot of people kicking back and exposing different ways of it, I suppose.
Yeah.
For example, they're wanting to vaccinate and put boluses down cattle to stop them burping, which is it's an animal health issue. It's really bad. So I suppose it's a
Exactly.
little bit of kickback from that, I suppose. But
Yeah. Because you
yeah,
think that maybe 10 years ago or even 5 years ago, if they'd suggested such a thing, most people would have gone, okay, we need to stop the burping, we better do that. But
yeah,
now we're going, actually, hang on, what about the animal? What
yeah,
about thinking
yeah.
beyond making money? And so everybody is starting, it's very subtle but very intense at the same time. So that's a great example of how things are coming out in different ways. And there's always someone that's going to be out there to try and wreck it. So in New Zealand at the moment, to fill you in with the non-New Zealanders, there's a big stink about the cost of butter. Because butter is a traditional New Zealand created thing that's been there for forever, and the price of it is through the roof. So, how much would you pay for a packet or a pound of butter in Canada, Linda?
About 4.89, $5
About five
Canadian.
dollars.
And that's gone up terribly the last couple of years as well.
Yeah, yeah. So I don't actually know what the exchange rate is between the New Zealand dollar and the Canadian dollar to work that out.
I think the New Zealand dollar is about 85 cents
But just under,
Canadian.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And
yeah.
um, and what about you, Vivian? Do you know how much you pay for a pound of butter in Singapore at the moment? Oh, you're on mute.
I think it depends on whether it's locally made or imported. The price has gone up, maybe by $2 or $4, something like that.
Yeah.
Mm.
So, it's become a real thing in New Zealand because we're the land of milk and butter and we should be able to have it for nothing, really.
Yeah, we
And it's
have New
become very
Zealand,
expensive
New Zealand
here.
butter.
Yeah. And so, and interesting, I noticed that there was somebody as a school fundraising thing was going to one of the factories that produce the butter, and they were buying it in bulk and then selling it on. The school kids were selling it on to family and friends and whatever to make money to raise funds for the school. So this was a great little thing going on for a while there, and then it went sort of public and people found out about it. So the company that were creating the butter put all their prices up. So people couldn't take advantage of that anymore. But that was a good example of innovation, of someone taking something that people need and want and finding a new way to market it to them. That the school was getting an advantage out of it by raising money. The kids were learning about selling and buying and trading and all of that sort of thing. And the factory was selling probably more butter than it was before, but not at as much money. Unfortunately, that got shut down. I think they put their prices up and they stopped doing it or something. But these are all little innovative ideas that can come out of anybody. And what's going to be interesting, it's going to be the children that come up with the most innovative ideas because they're already born and programmed to think outside the box. So the children you probably wouldn't call them all children, but they've come through, particularly over the last 20 years, are really, really, they're streets ahead of us in what they know and understand. So, and they all want to run before they can walk. So that's the challenge for them. So this busyness energy that we've come into now for all of these young ones is going to really stimulate their brains and their pituitary gland. So they're going to have to watch there's too much overstimulation in the world at the moment, definitely. And so that's one thing they're going to have to look out for, especially with Uranus and Gemini, because it's going to turbo boost everything that's to do with communication and stimulation and curiosity and change. All of those things are going to get wound up and get busier and busier and busier. So the only way to cope with all of that is to take your power back, is to decide what you want for you rather than allowing yourself to be swept away in someone else's idea or someone else's concept or whatever. And it's not easy, but we're noticing it more and more around the world where people are finally waking up and standing up. I mean, I don't know what everybody else sees on TV or social media or whatever, but for instance, in Israel at the moment, I mean, I don't think there's very few Israelis out there who aren't against what their government are doing, and they're actually finally doing something about it. I mean, the ultimate solution to all of this war is for every single soldier to put their gun down. But unfortunately, they're all a bit too brainwashed to do that. But this is where we're starting to see, because, you look at Israel as a place where they have to do military service. And so they've all been in Gaza. They've all held guns against Palestinians at some stage as part of their military training or what they have to go back every year or so and do another stint of it. So they're all aware of this, and some of them, and the majority of them, are against it, and the majority of them are trying to change it by taking their power back. So we're really starting to see this worldwide now, where people are starting to speak up and step up. And this Gemini. Gemini is the energy of communication, and most Gemini people don't have a problem saying what they think. And the challenge often for Geminis, though, is they try to make it so light and social and funny and entertaining, is that sometimes the message goes over everybody's head. But usually, is trying to communicate. And so one of the things we're going to see that's going to really develop with Uranus and Gemini is communications of all kinds. And what I would like to see with one of these changes, and I hope it will be one of the changes, is that as much as we are going towards AI and technology and all of that sort of thing, that we also branch out and move more towards telepathy and being able to communicate with one another through what we feel and what by, speaking with minds. And this is when we start to, again, when you come back to yourself and start relying on yourself a whole lot more for your making your decisions and what you think is right in the world, you create an energy within you. And that energy then goes out to other people. When you speak, when you just exist, your energy is going out to other people. So the more of us that start sort of thinking for ourselves and making those choices within ourselves, the more that energy goes out to the world, and everybody can then start adopting the same thing, because it becomes a familiar thing, energy, even though you don't sort of see it, or it's not written down, it's not told, it's not, this is the way you've now got to think or be. It's starting to come more and more naturally to all of us to question everything. Because, Gemini is the planet of communication, it's a sign of communication, but it's also the most curious and communicative sign in the zodiac. So it's always looking for answers. So, and in astrology, we've always got the polarity. So the opposite to Gemini is Sagittarius. And so if Gemini has been activated, then Sagittarius has been activated as well. So while Uranus is in Gemini, it's also activating, it's opposing anything that's in Sagittarius. And so both Sagittarius and Gemini are very, very curious signs of the zodiac. They love to explore things. They love versatility. They love adventure. They love all those things. But they like to but Sagittarius likes to get to the bottom of things. It likes to find the truth in the matter. So what we're going to find is, as we all get stimulated to think more, we're also going to be stimulated to look for the truth in it. We're not going to become as accepting of what we're told. It's going to just become more and more normal if you go, okay, that person just said that black was white. That doesn't feel right to me. I'm going to go and think about that, or I'm going to investigate the bit myself, or I'm going to go and talk to somebody about it. I'm not just going to accept things anymore. So it's going to be, in some ways, depending on how open you are and how gullible you are, it could be very easy for you to absorb a lot of the stuff that's going on. But I think that the real sharp, discerning part of us is really being activated with Uranus and Gemini, so that we're all going to start to question everything, which is what we all should do at any time. And that doesn't mean making a big stink and jumping up and down and throwing a tantrum. It just means within yourself questioning it. Does this feel right to me? Does this make sense for me? And if it doesn't, you need to leave it alone and not just pick it up or go with it because everybody else is. If it doesn't feel right for you, we don't do it. And so I think one of the biggest examples of this would be COVID. I mean, a lot of people, as soon as the COVID thing came out, and then next thing we knew, we had a vaccination for it. I mean, a lot of people, I know for myself, on a very deep level, that just felt wrong, because I knew how long it takes to develop a vaccine. So for something to come out that quickly just did not align with my way of looking at things. Now, for other people, it might have made perfect sense, and that's fine. If it makes sense to you and feels right to you, there's nothing wrong with it. But if you're questioning anything and it's not sitting with you, don't go with it. Allow yourself to explore it, think about it some more, investigate it. Don't just accept things. And I think we're going to be finding it harder and harder as these next 7 years go on to just accept things. This is the way it is. Okay, we'll do that. It just doesn't feel right to be like that anymore. So have you noticed anything particularly changing, Linda, in Canada with acceptance and not lack of it?
Yes, very much so. That was a lot with the election, with
Oh, yeah.
yes, the prime minister who was voted in, and it's just right now there's a strike that has happened with Air Canada. That's our main airline, and it's the stewards and stewardesses who for for years now, they're only paid from when the plane the door is closed and the plane is moving. So everything they do before and after, and that has never come out. So they voted to strike, and the company, they started the strike, and of course have made all of this known. And the spokesperson, Air Canada, put out there the was questioned about his $12 million salary while there were people under him working for nothing. So
Wow.
a lot has come out, and they were the government tried to order them back to work, and they said no. And they have about 99% support from almost everyone in the country, except for those who are stuck on holiday somewhere and can't get home.
Yeah. Can't
But
get home.
so anyway, like that's a very powerful, and as all of you know, with everything that's gone on in the world, for Canadians to really stand up for themselves is really something.
Yeah.
Because in the past we've been, yeah, okay, fine. Whereas now we're very positive
And
about
that's
things.
great to see. And that's exactly what needs to happen here, is we're way too apathetic with what's going on.
Yeah,
Yeah. So it's
yeah.
interesting. So this is really the work, it's 5th of July. So we've had Uranus in Gemini for just over a month now. So he's well and truly settled in now. Usually takes a week or two for a planet to settle into a sign, but now he's well and truly in there, and he will retrograde out at some stage soon. But for now, he's there. And so, this is going to increase the whole AI thing as well, because that is way kind of like where the world is moving towards at the moment. And it has its purpose. It has its uses, absolutely. But what we've got to be very careful of is that we don't allow it to think for us or create for us. It can give us ideas. I mean, I use it a little bit in what I do, but I sort of see it as a thesaurus. If I want a different way to say something or a different word to use, that's where I would look at AI. But I won't ask it to create a blog post for me, or, I just, because that, to me, that's sacrificing your own intelligence and your love and your passion for things. It's just taking away all those things that make us human beings and that make us critical thinkers for ourselves. So it is really important that we, absolutely being able to have a robotic arm when you've lost your arm, amazing use of artificial intelligence. That's incredible. But like I said, allowing it to think for us isn't so good. So we need to, embrace AI, but understand that we need to be in charge of it, because for years and years, well, historically it was the kings and the queens and the royalty that were always revered and bowed down to by everybody, and then over the last 100 years or so it's become Hollywood and all the celebrities there, and some sports people and that as well all get bound down to. In New Zealand it's the All Blacks, everyone bows down to them. There's always something in every country, but they're all false gods, they're false beliefs that we're all bowing down to. And so the worst thing that could happen is if we all start bowing down to AI and seeing that as the be all and end all, and that's what we have to agree with or not agree with. It does not be a good use of that energy at all. So we've got to realize that, we've got to take back our power, our personal power, to be more in charge of our own lives. And so when you're more in charge of your own life, then that sends out an energy to the universe or to the collective, that the collective can be more in charge of their own lives and more in charge of what works for them too. But it's like everything that we do has to start with you. If you want the world to be more loving, then you need to be more loving. If you want to be the world to be less scary, then be less scary yourself. You've got to do this with yourself first. So that's a really helpful thing for people to know, that we have this power and we can use it. So the last time Uranus was in Gemini was between 1942 and 1949. So the end of World War II, and then the probably, I think, 45 the world. So, and then 4 years after that. So we had 3 years of the war, more or less, and then we had the 4 years after it. And so it's always good to look back at when things. Sorry, someone's just come in. At when things, when a planet was last in a sign and what went on there, what happened, what we can recognize or maybe work with again from back then. So what we did notice then, so in that time, what happened that we all noticed very much, especially as women became major people in the workforce, because all the men were off fighting. So the women had to take those roles. And from then on is when women really started to have more roles outside of the home. and started to move into roles and positions that weren't just teaching or nursing or typing. They were actually other roles that the men used to do, but because the men weren't there, the women had to. So that was a real innovation of people. And that, you know, for a lot of people, that was thinking outside the box, to have a woman do a man's job. I mean, back then, it's just so many things. Men did this, women did that, and they didn't change. So that was a big innovation that came out then when when Uranus was in Gemini. And then, of course, as we came out of that Second World War, there were all these new innovations for ways we could develop the countries that had been so badly treated or affected by the war, and the ones that hadn't done so were, you know, a bit better off. So there became a lot of growth there, and communication became a big thing too. We started communicating a lot more worldwide and in general with people, because I mean, in world wars, they, you know, do terrible things, but they also bring the world together as all the allied forces and all the rest of it. So they brought that together. But another thing that happened, which is a real shame that it hasn't retained the power that it was meant to have, is a lot of agreements and treaties were signed at the end of World War II, like the Nuremberg trial and all of that. A lot of stuff was agreed to and signed up to that we've all broken. Those agreements have not been held like they were to make sure that no world war ever came again. So, you know, Uranus and Gemini taught us a lot, but the change kept coming. And we're kind of back there again, back in the world war sort of any day now sort of coming thing, or the threats of it are right there again. So we have an opportunity now to innovate ourselves out of this situation, or to go with the status quo and find ourselves in that situation again. But I don't think there's any surprise that, you know, Uranus, the planet of change, would come in at a wartime to bring the change that could be positive or negative, because Uranus doesn't bring change that's always going to, you know, that it's always going to be favorable to us in a way that we like. Like I said, change is sometimes something we don't like, but is exactly what we need. And so this is where Uranus comes in and brings things in that might not be comfortable or something we like, but will be exactly what we need in the long run. So over these next 7 years, with the development of communication, and especially now that, I mean, back in 1940s, we didn't have the internet. And so that's just skyrocketed communication anyway. So it can be expected to change even more. And I feel what we might find will happen is we have two different types of internet. We have one that's very 3D, and then we have a more of a 5D one. Now, there's already all sorts of platforms out there that are more open-minded or less traditional or conservative that are out there for us to explore. But I really feel what we might find is there becomes two real ways of using the internet. One that's very much open for information, and one that's very much the old-fashioned way of doing it. Because, you know, as things are revealed, they can't be swept back under the carpet again. Because things are being revealed, you know, with this communication and things being so out there. When something is revealed these days, it's revealed globally. And, you know, 10, 20 years ago, things were revealed globally and then swept straight back under the carpet again. But now, things that are going to be revealed, I feel, won't be able to be swept under the carpet again, because there'll be it's almost like that you can't have any secrets anymore, because once something's out there, it's available and it can't be hidden. I mean, they do all sorts of things to take down videos and things that they don't like on the internet or whatever, but they can always be found again. They always resurface somewhere. And that's going to get stronger and stronger. It's going to be harder and harder to sweep anything under the carpet. Everything's going to need to see the light of day. So it is, you know, we're already in a time of very interesting with some of the stuff that's coming up, and it's going to just get even more and more interesting by the day. So we're learning to think for ourselves, and we're going to be in this intense busyness. So, you know, we really need to rely on ourselves a whole lot more. And what we're also going to find when we go within and start relying more on ourselves and coming up with our own solutions or our own ideas for things, is we're going to start to be more aware of the gifts and the talents that we have. Just like the women back in the 1940s realized they had when they had to work in men's jobs. So we're going to see stuff that's been hidden because we haven't had an opportunity to display it or exercise it, or we didn't even realize it existed within us. So, and I think I'm already finding people that I'm coming across who are suddenly going off on a new tangent or doing something different. And often the sort of talk is, I never knew I was any good at this, or I never knew this was something that I could do. And suddenly they've explored it a little. They've given themselves time to look at something and realize, I can do something with this. I can turn this into a new life for myself, or a new version of myself in some way. So there's a lot that we are going to discover about ourselves and our inner worlds too, that we can then use to help us and also humanity in general. And I would like to think also, because, you know, Gemini is all about communication, that there'll be a lot more sharing of knowledge. And I think that's going to become easier and easier, because I do feel, you know, when we have these, perhaps these two different types of internet or whatever, my feeling is that one will be quite censored and one won't. And I don't know how we're going to get away with it, or how it's going to work, or how it's going to come to pass, but that just sort of feels like the way it's going to work out the most seamlessly moving forward. So one of the challenges, so we're going to have a little list now of the challenges and the advantages of having Uranus and Gemini. So actually, when I was looking at it, there was a lot more advantages than there was challenges, so that was good. So the challenges are the chaos and the busyness. And, you know, you're going to be presented with lots of change, lots of opportunities, lots of things moving. And this is where, you know, it can become very overwhelming when things are happening too much outside of us. So you've got to come back to your peace. So things like meditation, and being able to find quiet space will be really, really important for you as well. You know, when I say you go within to find your solutions, you don't go within to stress out about it and spend hours, you know, over analyzing things. You go within to find a space of peace to then analyze from that perspective. So all about, as we've talked about many times, dropping from the head and into the heart for making our decisions and feeling our way through things. So, you know, there'll be so much information, so much going on around us that we're really going to be stuck in, who do I believe? Who do I listen to? Is that side of the story correct, or is that side of the story correct? And this is where you have to step into your own critical thinking, and you've got to feel into it. Does this make sense to me? Does it resonate with me? It does with everybody around me, but it still doesn't feel right to me. Well, that is a good signal that it isn't the right thing for you. And, you know, we've lived for far too long in a one size fits all world. And one size does not fit all. We are all very different people. And rather than that dividing us, that should bring us together. And that's what I feel one of the objectives of Uranus and Gemini will be, is to, you know, embrace change so that it can bring us all together on the same page, but changing all the time as well, evolving with that. So the advantages, I think, of having Uranus and Gemini is, you know, that returning to thinking for ourselves. So a lot of what's going on in the world at the moment, you know, there's a lot of change and everything going on, but a lot of what we're being asked to do is remember how we used to be. It's not about brand new ideas or concepts coming in. Some of it will be new. I was at a channeled thing a few months ago, and there was a person there channeling Jesus, and another person who channels an energy called Tabash. And so I had an opportunity to ask a question. So my question was, is there any such thing as an original thought, or is everything a memory? And basically their answer was, yeah, everything is a memory. There are very few original thoughts. Everything we've done or we do, we've done before. And so it's basically about waking up and remembering how you used to do things when the earth was different, when we all looked after one another, when we all cared about one another, when we all used our energy with the God energy, or the spiritual energy, or the resources of the earth plane, when we all relied and used those. That's what we have to remember. And this is why I think, with everything that's going on in the world at the moment, that the indigenous people around the world really will be the ones that can settle into this energy the easiest, because they already know how to think for themselves, even though, you know, they've been well and truly colonized. But they also know how to come together as a tribe or a community to create something within themselves. But the rest of, you know, the Western world is quite lost in that way. So we, the white people, struggling to keep up with the darker skinned people, because they just have this, genetically, it's almost like more recent in their genetics than it is in ours to work together like this. And so it's going to be easy for them to fall back into that way of being. So another great thing, advantage of Uranus and Gemini, is that it's going to make it very difficult for anybody to want to believe in or hold on to traditional and outdated beliefs. And, you know, things like, it's going to become more and more obvious that we live in a world of top-down feeding, and more obvious that that doesn't work except for the people at the top. And so there's going to be this need within all of us to make things a lot more equal, a lot more fair, and a lot more just. And so so when we look at the ways, the structures that we live under now, they're not fair. They don't work for everybody. They don't celebrate everybody. They don't honor everybody, and therefore they must change. And so it's going to make no sense to most people to hang on to anything that isn't for the highest good of all concerned. It just won't be within our way of thinking anymore to think that that's a good idea, because it's not. And we're remembering that we're all here to look after each other. And what else have we got here? So, and it's going to give us a lot more ability to expand on ourselves. So everything you do, you can question, oh, how could I do this differently? How could I be more efficient with this? Or what's a completely different way that I could solve this problem or do it? And to be open to exploring all of that. And not being afraid to, even if the idea that you have seems like the most outrageous, outside the box, crazy thought you've ever had, try it. Maybe it is exactly what we need moving forward. I mean, when you think about what people must have thought about when they wanted to learn to fly, I mean, most of the world must have thought they were stark raving mad to want to, create some sort of machine that you can fly through the sky like a bird with. I mean, it would have been absolute ridiculous to many, many people. And so, and so we look at a lot of stuff now and look back at that, and it's the most normal thing in the world now for all of us to fly and to have created a machine to do that. So why not keep thinking in that way? Keep thinking that the most outrageous things could actually be the biggest solutions for us moving forward. And so communications should flow a lot easier as well. We should find it easier to be able to work with each other's ideas. And that's the other really good thing about Uranus and Gemini. It should make us all think, like, oh, that's a great idea. I want to jump on board with that, rather than, oh, that's a weird idea. I'm not going anywhere near that. Because we're all just becoming naturally, without really doing anything, because of the energy of the planets, they open us up to being a certain way. And that's why we have what we call generational planets, where if we look at Uranus, for instance, Uranus is a generational planet because he takes 7 years to move through a sign of the zodiac, which means that every child that's born within those 7 years is born a certain way. And that's what creates the collective energy of a generation of people. So people, for instance, are all born with Uranus in Aquarius, all think outside the box. Most natural thing in the world for all of them to have a new solution to an old problem. And it might be just in the way that they eat their breakfast. It might not be, anything, life-changing or planet-saving, but there will be a way that they do those things that everybody shares that same way. And so that's how the cosmos and spirit really help us with the planets, is creating these energies as above, so below. So we get this sort of gentle, not always gentle, but always this hinting energy in the background. This is how you can be. This is what works. This is what feels right. And so we ease our way into that. It's not like a big sign comes up and saying everybody has to think like this from now on. It just becomes something that you naturally do. And so all of us will have already noticed, I think, by now, with Saturn being well and truly into Aries now, everybody, I know I am, finding a lot more clarity and what you want to do or be. It's just things that sort of realize, okay, that is going to work, that's not going to work. Things are becoming a lot more black and white. I know I'm finding that in my world. And the other thing, the shadow of that Saturn in Aries was the lack of, was having to believe that you are good enough, that you can do what you want to do. And that's another thing I've found also since Saturn's moved into Aries for myself. I feel more sure of what I do and more clear in my destiny, and less inclined to worry about what anybody else has to say about what I do or what I think. And so this is a really powerful way, because it brings us back to ourselves. And to know that it's okay to have your own opinion, and to speak that opinion. I mean, we don't want to shove things down other people's throats and tell everyone they have to think like we do, but we're all getting that confidence that we've lacked to speak up and to say it's actually okay. So have any of you noticed that you find it easier to speak up about anything at the moment? How about you, Kim? Anything you're finding makes more sense for you to speak up about than be quiet about from now on?
I think I speak up more about what I want.
Good.
So, my husband or somebody says, we could do this. I know I've got that Aries no, but
Yeah.
I've come up more with the idea of what suits me better, and not
Good.
afraid to.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we should be doing. But for so long we've been kind of held in fear of going against the grain or saying something that might upset everybody else, and whether that's your partner or whether it's the world. And so now we're actually realizing, no, actually I can change this. I can think differently. So are you noticing it anywhere, Tina?
Yeah, I probably have for the last couple of years, but I know there's a few things I need to work on a bit more, but it feels more definite, I suppose, when I speak up about things.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, good. And what about you, Linda?
A lot more confident and just speaking my truth, and saying about what I do, and what I know, and I find that what I'm finding is that when I do say things, people are very open to be open about it as well.
Yeah. And this is the change we're noticing with the age of Aquarius is
Yeah.
people are becoming a lot more open. You can say things now that you could have said a couple of years ago and everyone would have thought, oh, leave the room. That person's just too weird for me. But we're noticing all of this coming through. And what about you, Vivian? Where are you finding it anywhere?
This is it because it's Gemini is communications? Is that why you're asking? Oh, okay. Yeah, of course. Yeah, I'll speak up. It's just that I wish that I could do it more tactfully and like speak up before it becomes too much. And then
Right.
I'll sound crazy and angry. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's something for you to work on is and for all of us really is that when you've got something, an issue, deal with it immediately because the longer you leave it, the harder it gets.
No,
But
it
none of us
sometimes
like
it feels like.
confrontation.
Yeah, exactly. I'm trying not to be so confrontational,
Mm.
and also sometimes you're not sure if that's the intention or not, and then something push you over the edge
Mm.
because that the person gets too confident in what they're doing, and
Yeah.
of course you have to think about the intention behind what they're doing it, and like yeah, I just wish that I would be able to deliver this in a more tactful way. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So it's just taking your time with it, really, so you can deliver it in a way that is good for everybody else. So office, I have office here. I don't know who you are or whether you're just listening and watching. If you've got something to say, you can jump in now, but you don't have to. Oh, okay. All good. So, we've got all of the revelations coming out, and as what I would like to see and what I hope will happen, that is as much as these revelations and these things are being exposed, that eventually, and I think in the short term and over the next year, perhaps I should like to see this happen faster, is as the revelations come out, the solutions are also coming out at the same speed. So we're not finding something terrible happening and having no idea what to do about it. We're actually getting the tools we need at the same time to fix whatever that is that's been revealed that is being broken or dysfunctional or corrupt in some way. We're going to know how to fix it and what to do with it. So when we combine this Uranus and Aquarius with the energy of Saturn and Neptune and Aries, which is sort of the three sort of major ones at the moment, it really is a wake up and shake up the world energy, and literally and figuratively. Because Uranus is all about change, which will be more and more volcanic and earthquake disruptions around the world, and more water issues around the world. So scarcity and flooding of water are all things that are Uranus, and of course it's all going to be fairly sudden and unexpected. And again, that's interesting how that's coming out with some of the floods I've noticed overseas, and how like there's one recently, I don't know where was it? Was it Pakistan? Somewhere like that. And they were complaining that they weren't warned in time that the water was coming. And then the same thing happened in America, when those big floods in Texas, and that was also their complaint that they weren't warned in time. So again, we're starting to see, again, that's communication. Why wasn't that communicated in time? Where's the breakdown in the communication then that caused that to happen? So we're seeing where we need to communicate better, as well as communicate less and take less on as well. So we're getting a lot more clarity, a lot more purpose, and a lot more ability to rely on ourselves and believe in ourselves. And so we know there's a fresh start coming, and it's all about people taking their power back, going back to that sovereignty. So so everybody, if there's anything in your life right now that isn't working for you, that every time you try to go to that job it goes wrong, or the house is breaking down around you, or the relationship all you do is argue, whatever, if there's something going on in your life that isn't working, it's very much the universe saying to you at this time, let it go and move on. It's time for change. Because like I said, the universe knows exactly what we need at any given moment, but we only get to know things on a need to know basis. Because if you were to know everything about your life from the day you were born, you would have run a mile for most of it, and therefore you wouldn't have learnt anything and become the person that you are today. So it is important that we don't know everything, but this is why we need to have more faith in the universe looking after us, because I think we can rely more on the universe taking care of us than we can our governments or the people around us, because the universe has no hidden agenda. It just wants us to be the best we can be. And so it will always support us. But sometimes that support comes in ways that we don't like. But we've always got to remember, you know, when there's change, when you're being presented with change in your life, especially if it's come as a curveball or out of nowhere, just always know that this is exactly what's right for you at this time. It may feel uncomfortable, it may feel wrong, but if you go with it, I can guarantee you within 2 weeks to a month, you'll know you'll be right where you need to be. You'll understand why you had to go through this and what it's brought you. There will be a silver lining, there always is. But you've just got to be prepared to go with it. So, you know, we're really going to get an opportunity to explore ourselves over the next 7 years. And you're going to really start to see where you can evolve yourself more and step up more. Like I said, there'll be hidden gifts and talents or hidden things within you that suddenly get to see the light of day. So you can allow yourself to be more of what you've allowed yourself to be up until now. And most importantly, have no fear of being different. Pluto is an Aquarius. We're here to celebrate being different now. And whatever that might look like or be, you know, don't worry about it. And also, I've had a few clients recently, you know, wanting to exercise their ability to think for themselves and everything, but afraid of being shot down in flames or have been criticized or whatever. So what I find works really well, if you want to say your opinion about something, if you say, I feel blah, 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 then people can't shoot you down in flames as much as they will do if you say, I think or I believe. Because those are very, I think and I believe, you're entitled to think and you're entitled to believe, but they're very kind of almost a bit too confrontational or too much, this is my stand, and you know, the aggression almost there or the defensiveness there. So, you know, when you say I feel, you're talking about something you feel, something that is personal to you, and nobody's got any right to contradict that or tell you you're wrong or whatever, because it's a feeling that you have. So allow yourself to feel into things and to know that feeling into things is your truth and is your highest truth as well. So anybody got any questions or anything else they'd like to talk about with Uranus and Gemini?
Yeah.
Yeah, Linda.
I have a question, or I don't know, anything that you can give me on the situation. I am a Gemini, 12th house, so Uranus will be conjuncting both Mars and my sun within the next little while.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on where that's going? I know that there are deep changes that this is going to cause.
Yeah. So
And
what Uranus is going to do while he moves through your 12th house is act as a trigger for everything that you've buried.
okay.
Yeah. So it's going to come at you with curveballs. You're going to probably find that people around you will do and say things that trigger an old wound or something you've buried. So you've got to be very careful not to react to what's going on now, but see it for what it is. It's a trigger. Oh my, that person suddenly made me feel really ugly. Why do I feel ugly? When did I last feel ugly? Well, how far back does that go? Have I always thought I was ugly? You've got to see, where's this come from? Because it's like I said, it's nothing new. It's old stuff coming up to be cleared. And so I would say,
So
especially for
control
you,
the reaction.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. So on this Saturday, the 23rd, I'm running another masterclass on Uranus and Gemini, but it'll be on everybody's personal charts. So if any of you listening to this or wanting to sign up for this, so the usual story, I've put it out on Facebook, and there'll be a link there. You can join up, $33 for the class, and it's on Saturday starting at 9 a.m. New Zealand time. And we'll look at everybody's charts personally, so you can see how personally Uranus is going to affect you. I'm not in my chart. I'm particularly not really looking forward to it, because for the last 4 years I have moved house a lot, and now Uranus has just entered my 4th house for the next 6 years. So my 4th house is my house of home and family. So it looks like I'm going to be moving again and again and again over the next few years. Well, not necessarily, but usually that's the most common thing when Uranus is moving through the 4th house, that there's going to be lots of changes within the home and family, which usually mean moving house. So yeah, yeah, moving on the 8th of October, actually moving down to the South Island, down to just out of Nelson. We found a place at Mapua, if anyone knows down that way. Do you know that, Tina? Yeah.
Exciting.
Yeah, it's beautiful, beautiful part of the world. So we found a place there to see whether we like living in the South Island or not. And yeah, so I'll be coming to you from down south from October.
Wow. Nice.
Great.
Okay. All right, everybody. Thank you for joining me today. And if you'd like to join me on Wednesday, the information will be on the Facebook page and everything. If you don't see it or you need it, just email me and I can send it to you directly that way.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Thank
Thank you. Take care.
Thank
Have
you.
a great day. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.